All right. Well, I layered today too. When I got here, I had to take part of my layering off because I got so hot so fast. But all right. Let me do one other little thing, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about y'all's if y'all have any questions or whatever. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns, anything at the front of your mind? Yeah, Isabel?
Freire was talking about how oppressors confuse being with having. It reminded me of just like in general in society when people like define their worth on like how their possession.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one of the things that Freire points out is that one thing that can, I guess in a sense, tell you you're dealing with oppression or you have an oppressive structure is the confusion of being with having. Isabel, what do you think that means? What's the difference? Yeah, so what's a good example? So if I say this, I am poor. I know y'all probably don't think so, but you know, that's what happens when you do this for a living. I am poor and I have no money. What's the difference there? Yeah, Paca?
I think being is something that you kind of like have internally while having is something different. Could be materialistic or it could be externalized.
Yeah, so if I say I am poor, because English doesn't make the same distinction that Spanish does, where it has two different to be verbs. So in Spanish, you've got a verb that's like, it's called ser, which is to be, but it's about essence. It's about what's there all the time. But then in Spanish, you also have estar, which is also to be, but it's about what changes, right? And actually, it's related to the Latin word for stantiation, instantiation, that kind of thing. Yes, Isabel.
So happens like in impermanent situation versus being like, because you're saying you are poor, you like identify with that.
Yeah, if I say I am poor, is that a quality of what I am, like forever, right? I mean, you could be born with a silver spoon in your mouth like Donald Trump and then end up being as poor as I am, right? But that would show a change, right? So it doesn't, he's not rich forever. So there's something actually interesting about money, which is the way that we measure poverty and wealth in our society, that we often lose sight of. That is, money is never anything other than a means. Money is a means. It has no other being than to be a means of transaction, a means of trade, a means of exchange, right? And this is what's meant when St. Paul says the love of money is the root of all evil. Why? Because money's just a means to an end, right? What's the real end issue? How can money ever become your means? Excuse me, how can money ever become your end? I want money. Mo money, mo money, mo money, as they used to say, right? I want it, want all of it. If Jeff Bezos will let you have some. Also, there's a difference there, right? Let's talk about Jeff Bezos just for 1 second. I mean, how can we not? $250 billion, I don't know, maybe $300 or $400 billion at this point, in worth. Yeah, what's the difference between being worth $250 billion and having $250 billion?
It's like $250 billion. They're not just sitting in his bank account, they're spread throughout his empire.
They're all over the place, right? And actually what we're doing there is what we're talking about is that Jeff Bezos possesses things, items, and organizations that people value at $250 billion. That's why for somebody like Bezos, or even for somebody like the Trumps, it's very important how people perceive your wealth, right? How they perceive that you've got it, because it's very important that banks and stock brokerage firms and international governments believe you to be this wealthy, believe what you have to be worth that much, right? And I'm not saying it's not, I'm just simply saying there's a lot more going on than people just having faith in the dollar. You know, you always hear people blathering about how the dollar's not real or blah, 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 or any of that. Well, now there's this. I mean, it is based on dollars. Yeah. Who had her hand? Isabel, is that you?
So it's looking for values of certain values.
Yeah, I mean, even look at that word. Where does that word come from? It means, this is getting a little light. It must just be, I have the power to drain these without even using them. As soon as I pick them up, they're like, they're gone. Okay. That's going to be an interesting sound for whoever watches the video. Yeah, look at the word value. I think I've said this to y'all before. What else? Where does that word appear elsewise? What does a judge do when he hears your case, or they hear your case? They evaluate. A value is always an act of evaluation, right? Some people don't think a college education is worth the money you spend on it. And maybe they're right in some instances, right? You spend $300,000 and $400,000 getting a Harvard degree, that money might actually be worth the money you spent for it. Because why? It will get you into the halls of the people who make these evaluations, right? I'm not saying the money you spend here isn't worth it. I'm saying everything is about putting a value. You have a value on your life, right? You have a value. It's not that your life isn't intrinsically valuable. Let's say, especially to your parents or to the people who love you, there's no price that can be put on your life, right? Courts don't ever have trouble doing that. Work commissions don't ever have trouble doing that. This school doesn't have trouble doing that. You actually are all a value to the school because the state makes them treat you as your credit hours. I'm not saying that that's what we really do. I'm not saying that everybody who's here is just a cynical asshole who's just taking advantage of you to get you to come to school. I'm saying that the way the state has organized the structure of this college, right? They don't look at you as people. They look at you as credit hours and payments. That's literally what you look like in the dean's register, in the dean's files. Right? That's what we look like. They treat me as how many credit hours have I generated? If I generate enough credit hours, they make a class, I make it crass. They make a class, right? And then each of you is slowly but surely generating the proper amount of credit hours, which equals out to a certain amount of tuition and fees and whatever. Paco, did you ever hear that?
Yeah, and it's basically like a statistic, right? Because like if you're looking like, oh, what's the acceptance rate,
yes,
or what's the graduation rate?
Right. Exactly. Now let's take a different one. Now that we've kind of done that, and I showed my anarchist colors again. I am educated versus I have a college degree. Now, this is actually a trick question, I think. I'm educated versus I have a college degree. What did those, Vanessa, what did those two sentences say to you?
Educated, understood the knowledge, have the knowledge.
Okay.
And you're able to put it in practice.
Okay.
By having a college degree, it's just that you were there and then that's it. You just,
Yeah. Yes.
You can't do anything else.
Look at the voting patterns of people with bachelor's degrees, and you'll realize they didn't learn much while they were in school. Look at the saving patterns of people with bachelor's degrees. Look at the stuff they do, right? What's the purpose of that? Why did you spend $100,000? Well, not always, but why did you spend $40,000 to $100,000 getting this piece of parchment, but you didn't get educated? Or you lack education, right? Because now there's here, what I want to do with this is I want to say there are times where you can say, I am educated. And this really says something about what you have become, right? It's not just that you have trivial information, right? The more you become actually educated, you change. It changes you. Yes, I know. I'm sure that Kanye or somebody could, has had a rap song or a hip hop song out about how money changes people, right? Money does change people, but that's because they don't realize it's a means to an end, not an end in itself, that it doesn't make a difference, right? Yeah, Vanessa.
I don't know, someone saying money changes. What would you?
The possession of money, like once you get rich, people often start acting differently. Sometimes they act differently because now they become snobs. They don't have to deal with the people who don't have any money. And other times it actually just has to do with you start doing weird things that you don't realize are your friend makes it. He's like, let's go out and get a beer, right? Or let's go out and get a drink. And you're like, oh yeah, sure. So they've made it. They got a great job working for Google, or they got a great job working for Apple, like corporate, not like, a Genius bar. And although that's still pretty good money. And you go out with them. And they drive you to the place they've been hanging out with all the people they hang out with at work, with its $22 martinis and its $35 whiskey sours. And you're like, do y'all have Keystone? Yes, sir. $10 a can. It's a bargain, right? So when you have money, it begins because you can also put you in a different lane, so that sometimes you can forget that most people are literally barely able to keep a roof over their head. And so, and then the next thing, you've got like your friend who hangs out with you on a regular at your house. Y'all don't go to their house because your house has 4 bedrooms and every brand new video thing that's possible, and an entertainment room that has basically a movie screen in it with, surround sound that George Lucas would be, jealous of. But this person lives in a 1-room apartment. And sometimes they can get their Sega Genesis to work from when they were a teenager. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like you wouldn't say money changes you like that. I feel like when you don't have money, there's a way you're humble. It's your humble character.
Yeah.
So when you have money, that character is no longer humble.
No, I think that's actually a good point about what we're talking about, is that there's if we talk in this terms about being and having, if you confuse being and having, right? If you confuse being and having, right? You enter into an area where the fact that you have things looks like a blessing. It begins to look like a blessing. It's weird because the language of the possession is strange, because it kind of goes schizophrenically back and forth. I'm blessed by God. That's why I got all this beautiful stuff, you know, man. Then the first time somebody says, dude, why are you always acting like a snob around everybody? I worked my ass off to get where I'm at. It's all by the work of blah, 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 blah. Hustle, hustle, hustle. Right? So what is it then if you're, and notice what we're doing here. We're not, I'm started us off, even though we talked about Jeff Bezos and Donald Trump for a minute, I started us off really in this thinking about, right? Just simple being versus having, yeah, in everyday lives. And we're kind of back to it again now. And we're actually kind of trying to figure out in what way, right, does being human have to do with having humanity? In what ways does being human have to do with having humanity? So you would think, well, and this really goes to the heart of vocation of humanization, right? Okay, so as soon as you come out of your mother's womb, assuming nobody in here is a android, as soon as you come out of your mother's womb, you're human. But again, we're going to talk about this all the time. I'm going to keep bringing it up. You have to educate. You have to become educated. You have to get training to be a good human. Things don't just start off, right? Because oddly enough, being human, having humanity means not having any strength at first, right? You have no strength. You can't even turn yourself over. You can't clean yourself. You can't feed yourself. Then you begin slowly to learn to do these things, right? And then as time goes by, something happens and you forget, I used to not even be able to do this. Like walking is something I do. I am a walker, right? Yeah, it's true. Part of having your humanity is if you have all of the necessary health things checked off, you can walk after you learn, right? So you have the ability to walk, but are you training it so that it becomes an aspect of yourself, right? So that it's something that you master, something that you bring in and create to be your own. In this real difference of confusing being with having, the people who fall into oppression become oppressors and sometimes sub-oppressors are the people who somehow believe they are this, right? I think one of the most interesting ones that I've seen from somebody, right, is to say, and let's take this, I am gay. That's the statement. I'm not talking about myself. I'm genderqueer, but I am gay. And then on the other side, right, I have a sexual preference. Now, hold on a second. I'm going to put another one up here. I am Christian. I have a faith. Okay. To be a Christian, were you born that way? Is a Christian born that way? Now, this is a sticky issue. We really don't know if people are born gay or not. But that also means we don't actually know people are born heterosexual. Okay. But because of heteronormativity, which is the notion that the relationship between the masculine and the feminine is the natural relationship, because of heteronormativity, nobody ever actually thinks I have to say I am straight very often, right? or that they have a sexual preference. Because, you know, if you're straight, you're in that same line that white people and men find themselves in. And that is, I don't have to think about it. That's my privilege. Not something I think about. But then people who are on this scale here saying, I am Christian, I'm not going to tell them they're not Christian if they say that. I mean, obviously, we use these words a lot of times interchangeably, right? So we're not talking about, don't cancel people who say, I am poor. Don't jump on their shit. That's not loving struggle. That's just violence. But I've been in a room with people who say, I am Christian, and another person had said, I am gay, and then they talk about being gay as a sexual preference, and then they talk about having faith as though it's a natural contingent of who they are, even though nobody is born Christian, which is why technically you have to be born again into the faith, right? Paco?
So with what you're saying, wouldn't it make sense to align like I have a sexual preference and then I have a religious preference?
Yes. So this is something that actually we'll get to a little bit down the line, maybe if we have time. Jaspers is considered a Christian existential thinker, just simply because, unlike most existential thinkers in the middle part of the century, he didn't jettison the notion of God just right out of the way he thought. Quite a few existential thinkers were atheists, but he was, he's called a Christian, but in reality, I don't know very many Christians, especially in the United States, who would think that Jaspers is a Christian the way that he writes and talks about stuff. But what Jaspers says is this: one does not have faith, one faiths. A person does not have faith like a possession, which now we get back again to the confusion of these things. If I possess a certain kind of faith, I am this, right? Rather than saying, I believe. That's active, right? It's like, oh, here's another one of my possessions. I have a Maserati. I have 3 cars. I have Jesus in my back pocket. I have da-da, you know, and it just kind of goes like that. And it's like, well, okay. So your faith is something you can possess, just like you possess anything else you buy or collect or accumulate. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Because actually faith is super important to everything we do. And I'm bringing this in now while we're talking about Paulo Freire, because Paulo Freire says, you know what the last thing is that you need to do? Lose faith in people. Don't ever do that. That's how you become an oppressor. Once you lose faith in humanity as a whole, then you've already begun to walk down the track, because you're going to be like, I have to make all the decisions. I have to do this. Right? It all begins to turn into this thing where you're not actually able to be in a good relationship with other people. And that's problematic, right? To be and to have. And, you know, the Chinese, you'll notice, if you ever study Chinese thinking, you'll notice the Chinese notion of being is more like having, but the reason there is simply they talk about the characteristics that something has as its being, not the possession of things. So it's not the same kind of, right? But I think I need to put that out there, because we may be looking at some Chinese philosophy later. So I wanted to. But so human being and having humanity. How do you have humanity? You have humanity by heeding the vocation of humanization, right? If you don't have humanity, what is that? I don't want to dehumanize anyone, but what is it when you don't have humanity? There's a word for it. You have no compassion. Yeah, you have no compassion. Okay, you lack some empathy. If you don't have humanity, you are inhumane, right? That's how you just quit paying attention to the homeless people, to the starving people, to the, whatever the case may be. And yes, I do understand all of us are struggling. All of us are struggling, right? But we don't have to confuse these two things just because we're struggling. That's just an excuse, right? Let me ask other people, because I just went off for 30 minutes off Isabel's thing, trying to get us to think about that. But let's, I said I wanted y'all to talk more and me less, but it's so hard. I'm a natural, I'm not a narcissist. It's my autism. I just love the attention that people pay attention to me. So let me shut up for a minute and try to pay attention to y'all. I'm much better when I'm one-on-one with people. Anybody else want to share a question or a comment about the reading or about anything we've been talking about or the world at large? Yes.
So I remember the other time we talked on Monday. It's about how funerals and how those things. And it seems like there's a sterilization, I guess, say that. Also the fact of incorporating other people's cultures that has become like, you might think, for example, where I'm from. Usually when somebody dies, they tribute, we're actually happy for them because they're going through it. And then in another world, and we are expecting that they will work with us. So we have to do and dance for them, just But when with colonialism, Christianity, and everything, it became very difficult. It's like, oh, we're just gonna put them on the ground and that's it. We don't have to remember them because we have to make this really good.
You don't have to remember them because you also have this weird idea, not weird, I mean, especially, a lot of the colonization that happened in the 19th century of Africa was Christian empires or empires of governments that were primarily European Christian. So the British Empire, the French Empire, the Belgian Empire, the Dutch. And what they did was they sent out, as part of the colonization effort, both scientists and ministers, priests and reverends, to go and teach a different way to the people they were colonizing, right? And you brought up something that's a really beautiful aspect of many African cultures and subcultures. And that is the idea that life, because it's to be celebrated, right? You're alive so long as there are people who know you lived. So once you die, once you die, you're not really dead until the last person who knew you or remembered you is dead. So this is another reason that you celebrate, right? Well, and that's also what it does is, even though you may have a strong belief, let's listen to me talking like a hypocrite. Even though you believe profoundly in an afterlife, you're not acting like you have all the answers. And you're doing what tradition tells you, which is to celebrate the life of the person, know that they may welcome you later on, and that you're letting them remember that you're doing that. And then so long as you do that and you tell your children about it, the longer they live, the longer they abide, right? Then these people come in who, on the business end, don't give a rat's ass about anything except getting a hold of those resources. On the religious end, are teaching you that, well, there'll be a resurrection, so it's so certain you don't have to do any of this stuff. That's heathen, right? And then even on the science end, right? Because even though science and religion seem like they're loggerheads in the United States and Europe most of the time, guess what? They worked hand in hand to colonize Africa and South America and Asia, right? So the scientists are telling you just a bunch of superstitious idiots and there's nothing that's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, spend your energy and your time making money for the people who colonized you, because that will give you something that they will have, that will give you something to give them, right? Because no matter how much we want to say that the West, in going out into the world, gave the world all this science and technology and engineering and enlightenment, gave it as a gift, it's very easy to see that it's the gift that always takes. Right? And so, yeah, when you appropriate for the purpose of making money, right? That's just taking more resources. This is the thing that, on the one hand, you know, I think Dave Chappelle, I don't want to get into controversy. I think Dave Chappelle has gone too far with the last thing that he did, but I understand a lot of the things he does as a Black entertainer, in the sense that I'm not just going to let people make money off of me and not get anything. And that's what, you know, that's what a lot of people are trying to put forward. Even on TikTok, Black creators are like, you know, start, or even sometimes it's a whole bunch of different creators, Asian creators, Black creators, Latino creators, just, you know, any kind of marginalized group creators. They're like, if you take a dance that we invented, that I choreographed, and don't give me credit, you're just stealing from me, right? So you have to. And so one thing that I began noticing is, and I started unfollowing people who don't give credit to the choreographers, right? I know this sounds kind of lame example, but the point is that everybody, if appropriation is about how you make money or how you get capital out of somebody else's creativity or somebody else's tradition. It's not about, you know, just because you say namaste once in a while to somebody, or you do, you know, some yoga, or you know, wear these things that I would like to tell you my Chinese friends sent me from China, but anyway, right? It doesn't, appropriation is about getting capital, and there are three forms of capital that you can get. You can have financial capital, you can have cultural capital, and you can have social capital. All three of those things, financial, which we would call money or investments, social capital would be like, well, what happens on social media with influencers and things like that, that's capital, right? It can actually be turned into this. That's what they want to do. And then you have cultural capital. Cultural capital is things like your college degree, right? Okay. But yeah, these things get appropriated. And what's really weird to me, like in terms of like, you know, some of the criticisms that come from some Christians about things, they're like, well, nobody ever talks about, you know, this being appropriated by, you know, Christianity be appropriated this way. And I'm like, no, they should though, because y'all let Christmas be appropriated by every corporation who wants to make money. And then you say it's a war on Christmas because people are saying happy holidays. But the war on Christmas happened 60 years ago, when you just let corporations take Christmas over and start making as much money off of it as possible. When you just let the day after Thanksgiving become the day that everybody leaves the table and the family and goes and stands in line for 12 hours to get the newest video game or Cabbage Patch doll or whatever the kids are playing with these days, right? That's problematic. You were like, and why did you allow that appropriation to occur? Because you thought it was the culture, but you didn't realize the business people who appropriate, they don't give a rat's ass about the culture. Do you think all the people who make money off Christmas are Christians? No. right? Or Easter, or any other Christian holiday, St. Valentine's Day. I mean, there's one where they literally appropriated a holiday nobody gave a rat's ass about, and they turned it into a multi-billion-dollar profit opportunity. So kudos to that, but it's not, it is allowing your most cherished beliefs and most cherished creations and traditions to just be turned into nothing more than a means to make money. And money itself is just a means. So it's a means to make a means. That's, Paco, you had your hand up a minute ago and I just kept talking.
Oh, you're good.
Well, there's a part of me that's bad. That's the Sith part.
I mean, I just think like appropriation, I think you made a very good TikTok there. Like a lot of the creators of the actually making the dances, dances were not like going up, going viral. And then like one of the big TikTokers we find that he do the dance and be like, oh, Jimmy Kimmel doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And now you're getting credit.
And the credit doesn't get to the creator.
Yeah, and I think this goes even further back in time, like people now know that like the pioneers of rock and roll were actually also black.
Yeah.
People that, you know, that did so many things that to this day we enjoy,
Right.
not actually giving credit. So I think
No, this is the way that it happens, unfortunately. And that's not to say it hasn't always happened. That's the worst argument anybody could tell me. The people have always done this. And it's like, yeah, right? I told you, didn't I, that 150 years ago, 8-year-old girls could get married? People have always done it. 10-year-old kids could die in factories where they were used because they could climb into the machines. But there's always more 10-year-old kids. Well, no, we shouldn't have kids. But it's always been done. Come on, what are you trying to do? Right? So that's a horribly weak argument. We've always done it this way is the worst, I think, most thoughtless argument anybody can throw at you. Yes, we have always appropriated from people. That doesn't make it right. We've also always raped, killed, right? People have done this a lot, and we still think it's bad. Can we also think this is bad? Well, it's because it's an inconvenience to somebody now, right? To those who have confused being with having, and they usually get to, more than anything else, I know I'm on a screen, but more than anything else, they get to have their way. They get to have their way. And so long as they get to have their way, they are good. And that's really what we're talking about. Now, what I do want us to kind of pivot to real quick from page 47 of the text. Oh, surprise, surprise. Let that get warmed up. Freire actually uses the term conquest on page 47. And I want us to see, you know, how important that using that term is given the things that he's saying. One second, I gotta make myself a co-host of the thing I'm hosting already. Okay. All right, let me roll the screen down. Okay, so what does Freire intend when he says freedom is acquired by conquest, not by gift? It must be pursued constantly and responsibly. Now, this is interesting because this is where he's talking about charity, right? When I talk to someone conservative about Freire, the first place I start is to talk about how we need to, like, you know, not just do charity, the welfare state. That's the first place I start, right? Because I know they'll agree with me right off the bat. You're so right. These welfare queens in their Cadillacs, You know, all these people who become dependent on the government handouts so that they can't do anything for themselves, blah, 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 blah. Get them into that and get them on this line. And it's like, yes, it is. It's a bad thing to just get into that kind of headset or mindset. Why does Freire critique charity? Let me go ahead and open the actual text up real fast. And I have it here somewhere. I don't know where I did put it. Okay. It's a lot faster to go this way. Let me get to this page. 47, right? Okay. Here. So first we're talking about prescriptions. So I want to start off with the fear of freedom stuff because that's absolutely imperatively needs to be understood. The fear of freedom. Which afflicts the oppressed, a fear which may equally well lead them to to desire the role of oppressor or bind them to the role of oppressed should be examined. One of the basic elements of relationship between oppressor and oppressed, right, is prescription. Every prescription represents the imposition of one individual's choice upon another, transforming the consciousness of the person prescribed to into one that conforms with the prescriber's consciousness. It's a lot of words. A lot of actually multi-syllable words. My friend Angela, who teaches, she's like, I love the things you think about, but when you write, you just have too many syllables in every sentence. And she's a literature person. Anyway, okay. So prescription. What is this prescription here he's talking about? Give me a prescription that you've had to conform to your entire life. You're doing it right now. Right. Why do you have to go to school? I'm not saying you don't need an education. Please don't. Say, oh, well, why you put me in a class with that bastard? He doesn't even think we need education or nothing. No, everyone. I've already said education is the way we enculturate, right? But that doesn't mean there's not a lot of prescriptions inside of it that administer, right? So have you been prescribed? What happens if you don't go to school? Isabel?
It's like the fear of the unknown of what will happen if they weren't in school.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, interesting thing that's come out with people that are homeschooled or people who, you know, they get schooled in little pods that their parents put together, is that unlike what everyone said, they won't be properly socialized. That's not true. It's just like they used to say that only children had all kinds of behavioral issues and didn't know how to play nice, and kids who had brothers and sisters did. But actually, after they did a decades worth of study, what they found was if you've got a brother, sister, sibling that's always screwing with your shit, you don't want to share. If you're alone, here, I want a friend. I'll share my food with you. I'll share my time with you. I'll do this thing with you, right? Same thing with kids who are homeschooled. They're actually quite socially well adjusted. I mean, on the average, I mean, I suppose they could be in a bad situation. They're actually socially well adjusted, and in a way that's very different because they're not actually being socialized according to school, which is one series of prescription after another series of prescription. We prescribe you all to be in the same grade because of the same age. We prescribe you to read. We prescribe you to do math. We prescribe you to learn the rules. We prescribe you to do recess. We prescribe you blah, 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 do homework, right? Every prescription represents the imposition of one individual's choice upon another. Right? And this is interesting right now because what's going on in South Lake with their school board, right? Because what's going on is the school is simply trying, some of the teachers are simply trying to teach the basics of American history and race. And these people are saying that they're being, somehow a prescription is being put on their kids, right? So they're all turning around and re-prescribing or counter-prescribing. I don't want my kids to learn anything about race in school at all. How is that the answer to the problem? Right? So it's an extremely, because here's the deal. If, let's say, and I'm not saying that teaching kids about something that would make them uncomfortable will not make them uncomfortable, because I just said it's going to make them uncomfortable. It doesn't necessarily make them believe they're racists. It doesn't make them believe a whole host of things about themselves, right? Because actually what you're doing is, it's when they say we want to teach about race, it's not necessarily a prescription. When they say they want to teach about misogyny, it's not a prescription. They're simply saying this is a reality that happens in our society. We want to teach about it. Right? And the parents are like, we should have control. Now notice what this is. We should have control over our children's education and what we want them to learn. And we don't want them to learn this. Therefore, it should be banned. It should be not allowed. It should be whatever, right? But notice, they're choosing for everybody, right? Yeah, Adam.
Talking about the South Lake thing, so I live in South Lake, so
You're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, so I've been, really kind of been around it all.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw kind of talking about it was the people who, threw rocks at, the Black kids when schools became segregated are the same people who are trying to prevent the kids from knowing who the people were that threw rocks at the people.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I do understand, there's a lot of stuff I bring up in here that I know makes people uncomfortable. I know there are people who are uncomfortable when I talk about gender queerness or when I talk about, a lot of the things that I talk about, right? And go ahead. Oh, I thought you said something. And, but part of being in school is coming to a place where you deal with why it makes you uncomfortable. Now, I've already said a lot that a part of what I do is my definition of philosophy: the willingness to be uncertain, the will to ask questions, right? Uncertainty makes you feel bad, makes you feel uncomfortable, because we don't like uncertainty, right? Uncertainty usually triggers fear, right? But if you start little things, this is why I have you do the whatification exercise, which really is a howification exercise. It's getting over whatification for howification. And what's the deal you're doing? You're making yourself uncomfortable. Parents are going to think you're crazy because you're talking to I can't remember what you wrote about. A key. Those were actually the very first thing that I ever did, a key. Right? Y'all had some really good whatification, howification exercises. I haven't had a chance to read everybody's, but I really enjoyed them. And it's always good because I know when I start reading it right off the bat, you're telling me this made me uncomfortable. And I'm like, yes, all right. It's not the same. I want you to also notice there's a difference between being uncomfortable and discomforted. Right? Uncomfortable means you're going to have to change your position a little bit, and you'll find a comfortable position. Discomforted means I've just broken your ability to be comfortable. And I think that's actually kind of what I've seen with a lot of those people in South Lake, who are like, in one sense, protecting the memories of the people who threw rocks at the kids in the 60s, who maybe were their parents, if not them themselves, and is that they're discomforted, right? If you've lived until, it seems so weird because I know when Barack Obama was elected president, I knew that we'd never gotten beyond racism in our country. I knew that. I knew it was kind of just there beneath the surface. It's not, there's a lot of it, right? And I'm actually talking about active racism, not just the systemic stuff. But I was actually a little taken aback within 6 months of how vocal people got. And that also corresponded with the birth of Facebook and Twitter, which then meant you could say whatever the hell you wanted to say and nobody could do anything, right? Because now we're also fixing to get into, as we're talking about this issue of charity and all the rest of it, we also need to be thinking a little bit about how do we care? How do we care? And remember, I told you, I think on the first day of class, I could be wrong, Vanessa will know. Security means no cares, no concerns. And we confuse security with certainty. We confuse insecurity, which means no concerns, which means lots of cares. We confuse insecurity with uncertainty, right? Well, what if what we need to do is care? And guess what? This word care, just like the word cure, they are related to the word caritas, which actually is it's the word for charity in Latin. You know, when St. John says, anybody in here a biblical scholar, maybe you don't read philosophy, but you read the Bible. You know, when St. John says God is love, right? It's I think it's the third letter. God is love. Well, it's not written in English, it's written in Greek. What do you think the Greek word is he uses? The Greek word he uses is agape. You might have heard this in a sermon. Agape. Agape is the word he uses. Theo ein agape. God is love. What's the Latin translation of that? That's the English translation. What's the Latin translation of that? Caritas. God is caritas. God is charity. Wait a minute, but Paul Freire just said that we need to be careful with that. Yeah, because when God gives charity, he fills you up. I'm not trying to preach a Christian sermon. I'm just trying to talk to y'all from something you might have heard once, even if it was on a Sunday morning when you're getting over a hangover. Right? God fills you up with grace. God fills you up and doesn't ask for anything in return. Right? That's very different when most people give charity, when most governments create charity, right? Now, I'm not saying let's get rid of all these structures that we have right now that help people keep a roof over their head and food on the table for their kids and all that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a part of what we have to do to become a new people, to become a people who follow the vocation of humanization, who follow the things laid out by the Socrateses and the Buddhas and the Jesuses and the Confuciuses of the world, of history, right? That what we need to do is ask that question: how do we care? How do we love? Right? And that in itself comes back to something I told you the other day. If this means, in a sense, how do we love? And love comes from the same word as life, and love and life come from the same word as believe. It's believing. How do you love for Freire? The charity that is love believes in people. The kind of charity with huge twin tower quotation marks around it that we generally practice believes in the sinfulness of people, believes in the evil of people, believes in the laziness of people. They hear Jesus say, I'm doing a lot of Christian stuff today. I hope that's not upsetting people. I hope that's not uncomfortable. They hear Jesus say, the poor are with you always. And they think, okay, I don't have to worry about the homeless children. Even Jesus said the poor are always here. Is that really what he meant? You're basing your social program on the idea that Jesus meant people should stay poor? What's the context of that? I think Uncle Adrian, my Pentecostal minister uncle, must be coming through me right now. What's the context of that? Who does he say that to? Anybody know? No. There's a woman named Martha who brings a vial of very expensive oil. And she washes his feet with her tears and her hair. And then she puts this extremely expensive oil on his feet. And Judas says, y'all know who Judas is? The traitor. Judas says, we could have used that money to feed the poor. The poor are with us always. I'm here but a short time. But then a few chapters later, he says, I was in prison and you visited me. I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. That's not someone who says the poor are poor and will always be that and fuck them. No, he didn't. Exactly. He never would have. What do you feel like?
In Christianity, there's this belief that the more you are willing to give, you know, let's say your bank account, you don't have that to support yourself, you're willing to give.
Yeah.
God will take care of you in a way.
Right. Yes, and I have yes, that's just true. And that's right there. God will do it. And even Jesus has another one of, and this all plays into everything we're talking about. Maybe it seems like we've gone off the rail and I've decided to preach a sermon, but think about the fact, okay, that Jesus also points out a rich man and a poor woman. The widow, right? The widow has a penny to her name. It's literally the last thing she has. Doesn't have any more money. She throws it into the collection box when nobody's paying attention. Why? Because a gift comes from goodwill, and goodwill does not brag, does not make a show, right? But then the guy who's got 10 million gold pieces shows up, wearing the best, most expensive finery, and he wanders around with the gold coin in his hand so that everybody sees. Look at me, 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 what I'm doing. And then he throws a coin, 1/10,000,000th of his fortune. That's our charity. There was a Jewish couple who ran a very successful travel agency in New York City. And they lived on the smallest of means their whole life. This is a true story. I can't remember their names, but it's a true story. They lived on the smallest of means their whole life. But they had made throughout their life millions of dollars. And you're like, oh, they must have been hoarding that money. No, they gave it away. They put hundreds of kids through private school and college who never knew their name. That's this, right? And that's what we're talking about here. They put no prescriptions on these people. They helped to lift them up, because nobody can lift themselves up by their bootstraps. That's physically impossible. Okay. They helped lift them up, gave them a hand, right? And they didn't care what race, what gender performance, what sexual orientation. If they had need, they gave, right? So this is, now let's just keep moving down here. I'm sorry, so we can get a little bit off me preaching LTL. So the fear of freedom comes from the fact that we internalize the image of the oppressor, right? You become fearful of freedom because you're constantly being told if you were totally free, right, you might lose everything. So you need to put a cap on that freedom. Okay. And I think about that song that gets played. I remember the first time I heard the song in the 80s, it made me kind of like, ugh. The Proud to Be American song. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. That's it. You should stop right there. You should stop and begin the theoretical critique of that song. I'm proud to be an American where at least I know I'm free. He's not saying I have freedom. He's not saying I am free. He's saying I know I'm free. What the hell does that mean? What does it mean to know you're free? Anybody? Yeah.
To know you're free in some sense or situation, it's better than physically not being free. For example, a slave could think they're free, but still is a slave.
This is true. But the question becomes, you're proud to be an American where at least you know you're free. What are you free from? And didn't I say the other day that a Roman would think most of us were slaves because of the way we work? So maybe Vanessa has an answer.
The thing of this year are free because we do acknowledge, that there are others who are not free.
Yes.
So you can see that others are not free, but it's okay. Even though I am free because I know that someone's not free.
Yeah, that's actually a logical consequence of that statement. I am free. I know I'm free. I also know other places are not free. And then it's a question of how much of that is going to be, I'm going to commit myself to the freedom, helping others attain freedom, or how much is it going to be, I'm going to accept the way the situation is and keep working with my freedom that I have, if you have it. Because that's this issue of the fear of freedom. Sometimes, interestingly enough, if freedom is prescribed by the oppressor as X and you internalize that, you're not actually being free. Yeah, Isabel.
Availability bias also comes into play, because if everyone around you, like maybe in your situation at the time, you're like, oh, none of us around here are being oppressed. So
yeah,
it's like free, but you don't see like all the people who are being oppressed. So like you say like, oh, all of America is free, but that's not actually the case, because that's just like availability bias.
Yeah, exactly. Adam?
Thing that you're talking about this song, I think America's version of freedom is based upon us getting away from, back in the day, being away from the king or being away from
right.
That's our definition of freedom, so it's kind of different.
Yeah. And here becomes a question: do we have freedom, or are we free? And if I say I am free, but I've internalized what free means to the oppressor, then that being is not really free. Paco?
I think the word no also adds to like what you always speak about, which is uncertainty.
Right.
So
I know.
I'm free. So it's like, I'm certain.
Certain I'm free.
Because the fear of being uncertain is so deeply rooted.
Right.
It's like, no, I know I'm free.
Yeah, I know I'm free. I know that we're all free. I do know that. Because I'm uncertain, not because I'm certain. I know we're all free because free actually means the ability to be friends. Okay. Oddly enough, I think probably one of the most wonderful ironies of, maybe I said this to y'all before, I don't know. I think one of the most wonderful ironies of the English language is this word. Freedom. What's the wonderful irony, you might ask, Jenny? I'll tell you since you asked. It literally means doomed to be free. How can you be doomed and free at the same time? Now this actually might, because it's a doom, it's a destiny, it's a thing that we become, that we have. We can have it, but maybe we are it. We are freedom. But now I'll give you another word. Actually, I tell you, this means doomed to be free. This free means friend. This free means frank. That's how the word gets into the English language. When the Franks invaded Gaul, which became France, they took over the villages. They disempowered the former Roman and Gallic people who lived there in the villages, and they took over. And the Franks had complete freedom. The Franks and their friends who were also Franks, right? So it means doomed to be friends. But what does that mean if you're doomed to be friends? This also means duty. What is the duty of friendship? To be frank. By the way, when they took over what became France and all those people who lived in the villages, right? They started calling them villains. That's where the word villains comes from. A villain is someone who's not free because they're part of the subjected oppressed race. Now, I want you to notice this comes out of a different kind of oppression. All right, we can't just throw it all out. We have to figure out, how we can make use of it. Yeah, Paco. Huh? Fear? Well, let's look real fast. Y'all are going to be doing this next week anyway, so this is a wonderful little thing. Had them online. Middle English fera, Old English fire, calamity, sudden danger, peril, sudden attack. Proto-Germanic faraz, danger. Old Norse far, harm, distress, deception. Dutch gabar, German gafar, danger. This here, pie, that doesn't mean a delicious thing to eat. It means Proto-Indo-European. Per, a lengthened form of the verb word per, to try, to risk. Persist, to persist is to stand trying, stand risking, right? Right. Nonetheless, she persisted. Nonetheless, she kept standing. She kept risking it, right? So fear actually comes with the idea you notice something. You notice something dangerous, something risky, right? Courage, if I were to, give y'all a little wisdom from Plato and Aristotle, courage is not the absence of fear, right? That's foolhardy. Courage is knowing your fear and acting anyway. Right? So fear is a moment of uncertainty, but not so uncertain, not so discomforted, not so insecure, you can't do something, right? Ask yourselves this question about Southlake, Adam, and all of you. I said yourselves, so maybe you're Southlake personality. Ask yourself this about Southlake. What do they fear? What's the risk?
They just kind of have this reputation of kind of being this utopian society, I guess, where
Yeah.
everyone kind of, they have these, for example, apartments on the cloud.
Right.
They want to prove big apartments, and they want it to be the best education I think what they've had.
Right.
For the past 20 years, it worked so well, they don't want it to change.
So basically, they've created all but a gated community that nobody can get into easily, and they want to be sure to keep out the risk factors. So the risk factors are people who live in apartments, people who live in trailer homes, people who move in and move out, or who seem to be unstable, people who don't have a job, people who challenge the state of things, that race is built into our laws, misogyny is built into our laws, homophobia is built into our laws. That's the risk. I don't want to risk my children hearing that, because I've spent my whole life not listening. Right now, this is an interesting aspect too, Paco, because I'm glad that you brought up fear, because when I was doing 12-step groups, I'm sure I don't look like it, but all of us have fallen and had a little bit of trouble, stumbly trouble, especially when we're drunk. When I was doing 12-step groups many moons ago, because I thought that might help me figure out what's wrong with me, I came across an acronym that I've used ever since, and I even actually have it in my dissertation: fear. So there's fear, there's this genuine fear, the fear of this thing's risky, it's dangerous, it's hard, it makes me uncertain, it makes me uncomfortable. And then there's this, which I want to put with discomfiture: false evidence appearing real. If your whole town will fall apart because people suddenly realize that there are racial, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic structures in our society, if that whole thing would fall apart, it must not have actually ever been well put together, right? Since I've been talking about him so much today, as Jesus would say, a house built on sand will not stand, right? So false evidence appearing real. This is to be contrasted with authentic fear, right? You almost walk off a 20-foot drop you didn't realize. You should be scared. The doors of an elevator open up and you're about to step in and you realize the carriage didn't come and there's 20-floor drop. Do you have a fear reaction to that? Kudos. That means that you have good response. Tiger walks in the room. Because there are people in Southlake who grow these things, I think, have pet tigers. I'm just kidding. Tiger walks in the room because they got out from the zoo or somebody's backyard. You should be scared. You don't know what a tiger is going to do. I don't care if it's somebody's pet, right? The false evidence appearing real, that's when, I've debated whether to even bring this up because I don't want to get reported or whatever, but false evidence appearing real, one of the things that's been used in the last 6 months that's false evidence is the notion that just because you talk about race with kids, or just because you talk about, the history of race in our country, right, that's critical race theory. That's not critical race theory. Critical race theory is a legal method, right? Not a legal method in the sense, it's a method used by lawyers to examine the different kinds of laws and structures in our society to see where things like race may have been built into the considerations. And I don't mean built in to say they shouldn't be part of it, but built in to make sure that, you know, the wrong people don't live in the right place, or the wrong people don't have as many rights as the right people, right? That's it. That's all it is. The notion is a completely false evidence that some teachers simply want to teach the actual history of the United States. That's critical race theory. How's that critical race theory? It's not even critical. It's just teaching history, right? So here we are in this prescription, and you want to talk about prescriptions. Here we are. I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about prescriptions, but you know, when you really think about the prescription, why did I open the Microsoft store? That's not what I want. Here we are. Whoops, that's wrong. Let's see any of these. I don't know why they keep. It's difficult for me to maneuver here. There we go. Okay, we're talking about the prescriptions again. If you prescribe that teachers cannot teach the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments in school at the state level, don't tell me that you're not making a decision for everyone to not learn about three things. Slavery was made illegal according to the Constitution, right? Nobody can be treated like a slave except prisoners, I guess. And the federal Constitution of the United States of America trumps all laws made in states. That's a convenient one to not teach kids, right? The oppressed, having internalized the image of the oppressor and adopted his guidelines, are fearful of freedom. Freedom would require them to reject this image and replace it with autonomy and responsibility, which is weird because, you know, a lot of the people who are the most oppressive, they use these language, talk about appropriating. They use the same words and language, right? To want to, in a sense, you know, convince people that they're more free than they are, right? Well, you don't have enough responsibility. You're just too irresponsible. So we need to make these decisions for you, ladies. Y'all don't have the responsibility to do it. Poor people have no responsibility. That's why they're poor. They don't have a work ethic. Which is weird because most poor people I know work anywhere from 40 to 70 hours a week. Right? To surmount the situation of oppression, people must first critically recognize its causes, which now I will say that's one of the things critical race theory does. And critical queer theory, and critical feminist theory, and critical, right? And not at the level of being taught in school. Even here, I'm not doing that. I'm just pointing some things out, right? But there are sociologists and lawyers who use these methods to just see, right, what the prescriptions are, because all a law is a prescription, right, or a proscription. Okay, to surmount the situation of oppression, people must first critically recognize its causes so that through transforming action, they can create a new situation, one which makes possible the pursuit of fuller humanity. But the struggle to be more fully human has already begun in the authentic struggle to transform the situation. As soon as you see it the first time and you don't turn away from it, it's too risky. It's making you feel uncomfortable. But you're like, I see the way Asians are treated. I see the way poor people are treated. I see the way women are treated. I see the way quilt bags, which is another word for LGBTQ, but it's actually just a word. Quilt bags are treated. I see the way all these different people are treated. And there's like 300,000 people in the country who benefit from that. And then there's everybody else. Yeah. It's what? Oh, the disabled. Yes, I'm sorry. I don't mean to leave that out. The disabled, the neurodivergent, right? The differently able, the neurodivergent, it kind of goes. It actually is impossible, probably, to not actually belong to something. That's what intersectionality is about. Really, all of the intersectional thinking is trying to do is very Freirean. It's just trying to say, take a little closer, see what the intersections are in your life, and then use the place where you have an intersection, not to say I suffer the same as a black man because I'm gay, but because I'm gay or I'm queer or a woman, I see you, black neighbor, and what you're going through, right? Don't appropriate their struggle. This is why a lot of black feminists, like Bell Hooks, they often talk about black men as being a weak link, not because black, straight, you got to get all the things in there. Black, straight, cisgender, man is a weak link in the black community because black women automatically know they're in an intersection, right? And I'd say this is also true in Latino communities or Latinx communities, right? The women already know they're at an intersection. I'm this and this all the time. And when I'm out in the world, maybe I get treated as a black person, or I get treated as a Latina, or I get treated as an Asian. But when I'm at home, I get treated as a woman. And all that means, right? So they're already there in that kind of thing. So that's the reason they say that. They're not saying that to diss them and say that they can't be allies. There are a lot of really great allies that are black men to black women or Latino men to Latina women. They're wonderful allies in all those things. What they're basically saying in that regard is, do your inventory of who you are and how you are in the world. Look. And this doesn't make you a victim. This begins your freedom, right? The struggle to be more fully human has already begun in the authentic struggle to transform the situation. When you tell your father, I refuse to be treated like a child, and you make decisions for me, and I'm 24 years old. This is if you're a woman. Maybe it's also a guy. Although the situation of oppression is a dehumanized and dehumanizing totality affecting both the oppressors and those with whom they oppress, and this is the part that's going to be hard as we kind of get a little bit more deeper into it. Although the situation of oppression is a dehumanized and dehumanizing totality affecting both the oppressors and those whom they oppress, it is the latter who must, the oppressors, from their stifled humanity, the oppressed, the oppressed, it is the latter, the oppressed, who must, from their stifled humanity, wage for both the struggle for a fuller humanity. The oppressor, who is himself dehumanized because he dehumanizes others, is unable to lead the struggle. Thus, if you want to talk about something queer, I'm happy to go to the front. But if you want, I know I talk about it a lot, but if you want to talk about what it means to be Latino, what it means to be black, what it means to be a woman, I'll happily step back. Right? And I can't lead the struggle for women's rights. I can't lead the struggle for black rights. I can't lead the struggle for Latino rights. And I can't lead the struggle for Asian rights. I can lead the struggle for neurodivergent rights because I'm ADHD autistic. I can lead it. I mean, I'm not saying I should be. Don't elect me president of it. Yeah.
But you're not necessarily, well, not you.
One is not.
Necessarily the oppressor.
I don't want to be the oppressor. Yeah. I can't lead. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, in that regard, I'm an oppressor if I try to lead. If I make it about me. If I say I can lead this, you don't have the ability, because then I infantilize the people who actually have the real life experience. Yeah, because then I'm like, okay, well, if you're a black man and you want me to lead, the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me, and I don't embarrass easily, is a friend of mine who's African American invited everybody over for Kwanzaa. And I'll never understand to this day why she asked me to lead it. I felt so uncomfortable. But because I have all this religious, spiritual stuff I do, she's like, oh, it's going to be okay. But I felt so horribly uncomfortable. And, but yeah, I can't do that. Vanessa?
I think the same way people say, some leaders say that, oh, I want to be the voice for the voiceless.
Well, you know, yeah, they say that. They say a lot of stuff. Them totally hostile entities manipulating multivarious macrocosms. They say so much, those people, they do it. Yeah, no, I'll elevate the voice. I think, you know, a good thing to do is elevate the voice of the people that you want it to be an accomplice of. And that's another thing, right? When we're talking about this, the difference between being an ally and an accomplice. Okay. When you get married to someone and you enter into a family contract, that's an allegiance. That's actually where the word originally comes from. One family gets married to another family. They basically purchase the girl so that they can have this allegiance. They can put her away anytime they want to and break the allegiance and go where they do the next thing if it becomes better for them, right? Alliances always can fall away as soon as it's uncomfortable. An accomplice is somebody who literally is complicit. So therefore, if you go down, they go down. Right? I want to be an accomplice. I don't necessarily want to go down, but I want to be an accomplice. I don't want to be an ally, because allies easily can say, well, no fault divorce. Sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. Right? This is also what happens, though, a lot of times when people are talking about wanting some kind of change, and then they bring in people who can never be anything more than allies at best, and then treat them like, basically like employees. Right? This was one of the great criticisms that happened. One of the big criticisms, when I say great, I don't mean good, I mean big. One of the big criticisms of the anti-abortion bill, the SB 8, when they had the meetings of people, the women's groups went out of their way to invite women of color and trans women, and then regularly cut their talks short, talked over them, and completely and utterly paid no attention to any of the things they tried to contribute. And they only got them there because they begged and pleaded it would be different. They knew when they went that it wouldn't be. And it wasn't. And I don't think that they'll ever do it again. Right? Yeah.
I think it's the same. Like, thing happens because it was so impactful and so big. A lot of companies try to add like diversity, and inclusion, and that's all bullshit. Like,
yeah.
Like, before they even try to implement that, they're just checking the box.
And this is really good for what y'all are going to be doing for your next assignment about all these things, because it's going to be you doing some etymologies of things like education and instruction and stuff. Training is not the same thing as education. Training is barely instruction. And when you have a training regimen that basically comes in and really does do a lot of what some of these people say CRT is, it's like, this is this, you're a racist. They're not, you know, because they don't want to get into the finesses of it, right? They don't want to get into the fine aspects. They just were like, you know, this is wrong, don't do this. This is wrong, don't do this, because why? It's going to make the workplace a better place. Diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion should literally be about celebrating difference, right? Not causing some people not just to be uncomfortable or discomforted, but simply to get the idea. And I would say that there are some people who probably are speaking out against critical race theory, and they've had to go through those company HR trainings. right? Where they're all but called racists to their face just because they happen to be white, or misogynists to their face just because they happen to be men, or, you know, homophobes to their face. I've watched, I've seen. I'm like, this is not the way to get people to respect diversity. This is the way to prescribe behavior, and then you end up in this thing, right? And this is how we get to what Paulo Freire is really talking about. If you come in and you think the way that you're going to save the oppressed is by being an oppressor, you just gave it up. You just fucked it. You just screwed it. That's not going to work, right? Because that's always what happens. So how do we care? How do we love? Right? And this is not something there. I think next week I'm going to start off talking about Socrates and the stuff that Socrates went through, because I think it would be really good for y'all to sort of see the Socratic values, which reappear over and over and over again. What I call them Socratic values, but they're values that reappear over and over and over again throughout history, wherein people are like, well, if we know ourselves and we ask real questions and we are critical and we don't just take what the way things have always been as the way things should be, this, right? I mean, that's everything we're talking about. This is really the culmination of so much thinking that happened 2,500 years ago, but we're still having to think it. That's how you know something's not right. You know, because we're still having to go back to this. However, the oppressed who have adapted to the structure of domination in which they are immersed and have become resigned to it are inhibited from waging the struggle for freedom so long as they feel incapable of running the risk it requires. Moreover, the struggle for freedom threatens not only the oppressor, but also their own oppressed comrades who are fearful of still greater repression. When they discover within themselves the yearning to be free, they perceive that this yearning can be transformed into reality when the same yearning is aroused in their comrades. But while dominated by the fear of freedom, they refuse to appeal to others or to listen to the appeals of others or even to the appeals of their own conscience. They prefer gregariousness. Does anybody know what gregariousness is? Gregariousness is the quality of hanging out with people and being a happy-go-lucky kind of person. Loud, slap people on the backs, right? So gregariousness to authentic comradeship. Your allies are gregarious. We're going to do it. Let's do it. We're doing it. We're going to da-da-da-da-da-da. Then they fall away from it. It's not authentic allyship. It's not comradeship. Comrades are accomplices, right? All right. So in all of this, the biggest problem that we always have, and we have it, it's not what we are, but it is something we have. The biggest problem we always have is when you start thinking and asking questions, when you start your thinkering and you start sharing it with people, who are the people you can be frank with? Well, only your friends can you be frank with. Sometimes we have a nice relationship with our parents, so we can be frank with them. But, you know, I'm sure most of us are in the age range where we don't tell them a good deal of what's going on. Yeah. But, you know, when you're actually truly befriending someone, frankness is a quality, right? So you can be free with them. You don't have to be reserved, right? Because you're friends and you speak frankly. You can't be frank to Donald Trump. You can't be frank to Joe Biden. You can't be frank to Nancy Pelosi. You can't be frank to Marjorie Taylor Greene. They are not your friends. They are people with power, and they benefit from the power structures. I'm not saying that they're necessarily evil. I'm not saying that they're even you know, the pawns of people who are more evil. I'm simply saying they are people who have power, and the people who have power often do not like it when you're frank. Right? That's the reason I think Ellen's like asked 7 or 8 guests to leave her show when they got too honest with her about what they thought about something. No. Get out from my show. Right? It's what your boss does when you tell them there's a better way to do this, and all you're doing is wasting our time and da 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 da. Get out of here. You're not the boss. I'm the boss. You're fired. Right? So you can be frank with friends, because and also think about this stuff. If friends are the ones with whom you can be frank, and being frank is the first sign of freedom, now you know what the First Amendment is really about. The First Amendment, which most people don't understand, right, is there because you can't be frank to the people who have power. And you have to find a way to keep them, right? Whatever you can do, find ways to keep them from keeping you from being frank about the things that matter to you. So therefore, it's very important that you understand when we talk about freedom of speech, what we're talking about is freedom from the government to say whatever the hell you want to. Okay, up to a certain limit, like, you know, don't scream fire in a crowded theater, blah blah blah, that kind of shit, right? And maybe you come out and you say a lot of stuff that is very damning to the government. They can't do anything about it because that would be against the law. I'm not saying they won't. I'm just saying they're not supposed to be able to do anything about it. But here's where I think most people also don't get the whole First Amendment freedom of speech thing. If Facebook kicks you off of its deal, even though it seems to be a public deal, a public space, it's not really a public space. It's a private space that 1 billion people inhabit. And if they decide they don't like what you're saying, they can get rid of you because they're not the government. Now, we could get into a really nice set of discussions, and hopefully we will, about how corporations have become feudal governments. But as it stands right now, they are not the government. Therefore, if Netflix decides to not show your show, or if HBO decides not to show your show, or a company decides they don't want to hire you to do your routine anymore, or any of that stuff, the stuff I said before about the whole, that people talk cancel culture, that is not infringing on your freedom of speech. Okay. And most of the people who get targeted like that have had absolutely no decrease in their ability to say whatever and whenever they want to. They have not been deplatformed to the point that that they can't say anything, right? Paco? Yeah. Yeah.
But like basically that's what it is. Like at the end, the corporate people are leading the way, and then they can't. They're sponsored by Gatorade, so they can't drink water.
Yeah.
So like even their irrigation, like the plants are watered by Gatorade.
Yeah.
How we want it now.
That's a wonderful example.
Yeah. I think like corporate power currently already has so much like of a stronghold over government that we don't even see.
No, I think that's true, because this would be the place where, now that we're asking these questions and we're talking about this notion then of, that I had brought up here before, of the conquest. Where did that go? There it is. The word conquest. Okay, so I'm bringing this in now because I want us to see that the way that we normally think about a lot of things, right, that we just take for granted, are prescriptions. Okay, so the word competition, what does that mean? I'll tell you, petition means to struggle. So what does competition mean? Struggle against? Yeah, no, it means to struggle with someone. To struggle, yeah, to struggle together. To struggle against is contrapetition. y'all are taught competition is beating the other person, right? When in reality, it's the reason that, and it's weird because there's this language is there, but it's never really followed through to its logical conclusion. The reason you get kids to be in competitions is so they'll get stronger, so they'll learn certain things, so they'll be able to do certain things, but it's not a struggle to dominate. It's just simply a struggle of two people, or maybe a team, two teams, right? Conquest is another one of those words. I'm not saying that conquest has not come to mean this, and oh, the only real meaning is the etymological meaning. That would be a fallacy. But when he uses the word conquest in this structure, what he means is that we have to learn to struggle together, that we have to ask and question together. Conquest is the same word as question. We have to learn to question each other, right? And we're in a position with our situation, right, of being in this human condition every one of us born to die, every one of us joyous until we suffer, every one of us innocent until we're guilty, every one of us having an easy life until we're struggling, every one of us attempting to find purpose inside all of the accidents and chances that happen. That's all of us are doing that, even the billionaire, right? When you turn on to that, when you hear the vocation of humanization that's sort of talked its way through the mouths of a number of people over the history of humanity, right? When you heed that call, you're in something where you are seeking to gain something together. What do you want to gain together? Do you want to gain more time to play video games? Do you want to gain more money? Do you want to gain more social status? Do you want to gain more? Notice how most of these things are not quite, let's all do this. It's more, I want to have this thing and be this, be, there again, the whole, right? How do we care? How do we love? Right? How do we cure ourselves? To cure is to care for. Only we can cure ourselves. But interestingly enough, the people who ask these questions, who get into this thinker, and there are parallels of this throughout the history, again, of humanity. The people who get into this thinking also recognize that those who need to be cared for and cured are literally the people making everyone sick. Right? And so this is where you end up in that very screwy situation that the oppressed are the only ones who can teach the oppressor that they're being oppressive. And fear of freedom that's been instilled in the oppressed is also in the oppressor. They're not just fearful that you'll be free, they're fearful of what it would mean if they really were free too. Right? That they'd have to actually rethink everything they thought was absolutely certain. All of their securities. Right? And that's what makes it a really difficult struggle. And sometimes you get to a point where you're like, I just don't have time. I don't have the spoons. I don't have the energy for this. I cannot educate you up. Right? While you're putting your boot on my neck. So, you know, it's difficult. So one of the first things I'd want to say here is freedom must be something we acquire from our own effort by our own response to our situation. And so we have to let go of the security of conformity over the action needed to pursue liberation. I'm not trying to convince you. I don't want to convince you of anything. I know I talk a lot, and even though I say I really want y'all to talk too, I talk a lot. I know that. I don't want you to just take what I say and not be critical. Because then all I'm doing is prescribing how you should think for the rest of your life. I don't want that. I want friends. I'm literally, every time I teach, I'm trying, well, Yoda would be very sad at me. I'm doing something to find friends, not acolytes. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah, Paco.
I mean, you say like it sounds sad, but I don't think it is. I think like internally, most humans feel that way. But either they're afraid to like be aware of it themselves, or they're afraid to externalize it and say it out loud.
Yeah.
So I think that actually gives more power to you.
Because, thank you. It does kind of sound sad when I say it. I actually don't mean it sounds sad. Actually, it probably sounds sad because I'm always trying not to start crying when I'm talking, because I really do care that y'all have the tools to discover your own freedom. And I don't want to just simply build into you a pre-built, prescribed way of doing things, right? That's why I hate the fact that this class is supposed to be taught, start with pre-Socratics, then go to Socrates, then go to Plato, then go to Aristotle, then go to blah, 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 blah. I'm like, dude, here's 100 pages. Go read that shit. That's all they want you to know. It's prescribed for you. It's your prescription, right? What I want you to really want to do is I want you to be friends with people that you're frank with. I want you to be frank with people you're friends with. I want you to see that being critical is a healing place, because it's the place where you evaluate what's going on. Right? We have so much power. You can look at a person and know something's not right. You can look at them, you can tell. You see it in their eyes. Now, you can't know what's not right. Maybe what's not right is they have hemorrhoids. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable. Believe me, it makes them uncomfortable. This is also how you know I grew up around drag queens, because whenever I get serious, I got to start joking. Anyway, but no, it's right, but you don't know until you ask. What's the matter? Why do you look bothered, sad, angry, uncomfortable? Now, I realize this is very careful. I want to say this to all of the masculine performing people in the room. Do not walk up to a feminine person and say you'd be a lot better if you smiled, or you feel a lot better if you smiled, or what's the matter, darling? Why are you unhappy? Don't do that shit. Okay, don't do that. But you should be able to ask someone. You should be able to say to them, frankly, I'm your friend. Again, this is not strangers. Don't walk up to especially strangers. You should be able to see a friend and know that there's something going on, but not know exactly what it is, and then be able to frankly ask them, I'm here to listen if you want to talk. If there's something wrong. There's usually always something wrong. But sometimes you don't see it in another person, right? Because they've become so good at putting it down. One of the little things that I do with all my young friends that I make who stay in touch with me throughout the, I got people that I've taught 25 years ago that I still text and I still talk to. And one of the things I do every now and then, I'll sit down, I'll pick up my cell phone and I'll be like, their face will just pop into my head. And then I'll be like, I'll send them a text message and I'll be, it's going to be okay. All this kind of shit passes by. And then they're almost always, they're like, how the fuck did you know? And I'm like, because humans suffer. It's not a Jedi trick. It's just that humans suffer. And I thought about you and I wanted to make sure you're not suffering. Right? This conquest that he speaks of is mutual struggling together, right? Because freedom is the duty of friendship. You're doomed to be friends. That's what it means to be human. We are social animals, right? So you want to develop people who are your accomplices that you trust. And when they screw up, tell them you're screwing up. And when you screw up, be ready to be told you're screwing up. Stop that, right? It's the duty of friendship is to be frank. And freedom is the doom of being friends. We have to be friends. Have in the sense of must. We must be friends with people. So, in regard to this note thing that I put up for y'all to kind of help you in reading it, overcoming may be something we do alone at first, but it must come to involve us with others who will share in the loving struggle to freedom. Nobody can achieve freedom from oppression alone. And nobody, right? Nobody who reaches out a hand for help needs to worry that they're always going to get the hand slapped. Charity is love. That's what a helping hand is, right? Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to make sure you remember about this next Tuesday's assignment is that you're going to be taking that Anim Online, this thing, and making some use of it. You have 10 words that I want to make you look up the etymology of. So make sure that you write notes what the etymologies are, and also jot down, based on the etymology and your own personal experience, how you would define that word. Don't use Webster's. Don't use the Oxford English. I know that there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but the AI will catch it if you just copy and paste what Webster says something is. Okay? Here are the words: to educate, to instruct, to behave, to listen, to learn, to study, graduate, schedule, program, and system. Okay? These are the words that you're going to look up. You're going to do this thing. I mean, it's something it's a lot easier than the housecation exercise. I give you an example here: to teach, from Old English; to show or to demonstrate, from Old German; to point out. This is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Like I told you, some of the words are going to be like, it goes all the way back to pi, Proto-Indo-European. You don't have to go all that far, right? Just go back far enough that you get kind of an idea, so that when you see, what's going to happen is when you go into the thing, there's going to be a matching, 10 matching questions. So you'll have all of these words and then 10 possible etymologies. So if you've done the work, it'll be real fast, right? Then you go through and all you got to do is type up the words. Okay. Yeah, then just go to the quiz and take it. It's pretty simple. You can do it. I actually would say Oh, I think I still have this up as the wrong time on here. Yeah, I'll fix this here before I leave today. It's due next Tuesday, whatever day that is. Yeah, what? Oh yeah, I gotta take attendance. So let me go ahead and turn off all of the equipment here.